If I had $1 for every time someone asked me this question, I think I'd probably be retired by now. Today we're going to talk about what is proof of liquidity and how does it work. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome everyone, my name is Waj, and today we're going to talk about Berachain, specifically proof of liquidity. This is the innovative model that they have built, and we're going to explain everything that you need to know about it. Now, before we actually go into it, we need to understand why proof of liquidity even exists. And one of the reasons is that we have lots of chains nowadays. Unfortunately, most of these chains are ghost chains. You can actually see this yourself. If you go on a website like DeFi Llama, you can actually see all of the different chains and their total value locked. What you can find is, okay, yes, we've got some pretty good chains, Ethereum, Solana, some of the layer twos, but there's like 300 plus chains on here, and you don't have to go very far before you've got chains less than 50 million in TVL. In fact, 80% of the chains that are currently on DeFi Llama have a TVL of less than 50 million. And in fact, if you scroll down a little bit more, 70% of all the chains that are on DeFi Llama right now have less than 10 million TVL. This is not very good. It ultimately shows that these ecosystems are immature or they just can't attract value. And what's really interesting is if you actually look at some of these chains, the actual governance token or the native token for these chains is valued at quite a significant premium to that of the TVL. Ultimately, what this means is that validators are going to keep validating. They're going to keep securing the network because they've got a lot of value that they can actually extract from these different proof of stake chains. But the ecosystem doesn't really benefit from that in any way, shape, or form. And so you've got some of these ghost chains, as we like to call them, where there's just not really much going on there, but there's still lots of validators who are going to keep being active on there because they can earn these tokens, which they can then dump or sell after. So the question I'm really going to pose to you all today is, can we fix this mismatch between validators, who are obviously earning by securing the network in these proof of stake chains, and ecosystems which are, in most cases are quite dead? And the answer is yes, we can actually. And Berachain proof of liquidity is exactly what this is. Now, in Berachain, there's actually a tri-token model. You can include Honey as well, which is a stablecoin, but today we're just going to talk about BGT and BERA. So a little background on the tokenomics first. BGT stands for the BERA governance token. It's really important that you know this, but it's actually non-tradable. The only way to actually get yourself some BGT is by earning it, and you can only earn it by doing economic activity on the blockchain. Specifically, what you have to do is you have to stake liquidity tokens in whitelisted pools, and we'll talk about this in a lot more detail shortly. This BGT can actually be delegated to validators, and we'll talk about that as well shortly. And the last thing is that BGT itself, whilst it's not tradable, you can actually convert it into BERA, which is the other token, and that is tradable. So BERA is the gas token that is tradable. You can actually buy that on the market. It's required if you actually want to do any activity on Berachain because you need it for gas. And the other function of it is that validators actually need to get themselves some BERA, and they need to stake this in order to fulfill their validator requirements. This transferable model where you can basically redeem BGT for BERA is one way, it's one-to-one. So it doesn't work the other way around. You can't convert BERA into BGT only this way around. So the question is, how do you actually earn BGT? And as I mentioned, you have to provide and stake liquidity within whitelisted liquidity pools. Now, at the moment, we're on testnet. So there's a few different ways that you can do this on the testnet. But at the moment, you can see on this image, we have Bend, which is the lending market, Burps, and we have Bex. And right now, these are the three different whitelisted pools that are currently available. Now, the amount of BGT that you earn by providing liquidity into these different whitelisted pools is based on a couple of things. Firstly, it's how much you've basically staked within this gauge. So if you've only put in, let's say, $1, you're not really going to get so much. But if you've taken out like 90%, if you've got 90% of the entire pool, then obviously you're going to earn a lot more. And secondly, it's based on the amount of BGT rewards actually emitted to this gauge. So if there's not that many BGT emitted to a gauge, then you're not really going to earn that much. However, if you're providing liquidity into a gauge that has quite a significant amount of BGT emitted, then you're going to earn hopefully a lot more. And at the moment, as I mentioned, there's a lending market with Bend, Dex being Bex, and Perps being Burps, which are currently the three native apps on Berachain. And in future, hopefully, there will be a whole range of whitelisted pools that are also accessible as well. And yeah, this image is just an example to show you how it looks from a user perspective. You can see that I've basically provided some Bitcoin and I've borrowed some Honey against this. Because I've done this, I'm able to actually earn some BGT because this is a whitelisted pool that has BGT emissions attached to it. And you can see that I can directly claim my BGT rewards through this interface. Now, in order to appreciate proof of liquidity, I think you need to look at it from the 4 different ecosystem participants who are basically playing this game that we call POL. We have validators, the BGT holders or the LPs, which is like you and me, the foundation itself, and ecosystem protocols, which we'll also talk about at the end. Now, I've just written a brief point on each of these, but what we're going to do is we're going to go into each of these individually and explain exactly how they play the POL game, what they do, and how they work as well. So let's start with validators first. Now, in order to become a validator, if you're fortunate enough to become one, at the moment there's 150 on the testnet right now, you actually need to stake some BERA. Currently, this is around 69,420 BERA tokens. In terms of how much this is going to cost you, I'm not too sure. I'm just going to assume. I have no idea. I'm going to assume it costs a few $1,000,000, but ultimately, I'm not too sure how much exactly this is going to cost. We'll have to find out, and ultimately, that depends on what the market values the BERA token to be valued at. Validators need to try and get themselves as much BGT delegated to them as possible, and we'll talk about this below as we scroll down. What validators do is they help to secure the network, they verify different blocks, and in return for doing that, they earn BGT as block rewards. And what validators have to do, they must, is distribute a part of this BGT to whitelisted pools. Now, as far as I'm aware, they keep the majority of this BGT themselves that they earn, just like every other POS chain. But unlike other POS chains, they have to delegate or distribute, I should say, some of this BGT to whitelisted pools. They have to. I'm not too sure how much, again, this is going to be. This information isn't out at the moment, as far as I'm aware. I'm going to assume that it's somewhere around 10%. So 10% of the block rewards that they get are going to go back into the ecosystem, back into whitelisted pools. And I've taken this image from the Berachain web app, where you can get a good idea of all the different validators that currently exist today, the likes of the Honeyjar, some of your favorite apps, whether it's Kodiak or Infrared or Beradrome, and some of your favorite community projects like Beraland also are available here. And you can see that they're currently ranked in terms of their voting power. This ultimately is how much delegations they've received in terms of BGT. You can see other metrics in terms of their commission as well. So the question is, why do validators actually want delegations? And that's a really important question. The answer is pretty simple. The emissions of BGT are based on delegations. And so from this example, we can see the Honeyjar have quite significant voting power. And basically, based on this, currently on testnet, this means that the Honeyjar are going to be getting the most BGT from the block rewards of all the other validators. And so ultimately, more delegations equals more rewards for the validators. So how can some of these validators become pretty attractive to delegate to? How can they really get as many delegations as possible? And this is of course really important because more delegation equals more rewards for them. Well, what they can do is someone like, let's say, Beraland, they can basically create some partnerships with some of these different protocols and basically give them the BGT emissions that they have to distribute anyway. And in return, some of these protocols and users will be like, wow, my APRs are going up quite nicely because of these BGT emissions. You know what? I'm going to delegate to them. And so forming these relationships is really important. It can create these lovely flywheel effects where the validators can get more delegations. That means they earn more rewards, and those rewards can fly back into the ecosystem. And it creates this lovely flywheel effect because of this. So the next question is, how do validators actually decide which protocols or which whitelisted pools, I should say, to distribute this BGT to? One of the ways is through bribes, and this is a really important thing that can really help to power the whole proof of liquidity flywheel. Protocols and users, for example, Kodiak or Infrared or IVX, they can actually put up fees or rewards or tokens that they can actually give to these validators in return for them sending more BGT emissions to their own pool. This can help to increase their liquidity pool and be a little bit more capital efficient with that too. And of course, the validators can earn some extra money. They can earn some bribes for doing so. They don't have to do the hard work. They can see where there are some attractive rewards for them, and they can basically fulfill those bribes directly. And this is a really important thing that I think you should all really appreciate. Now, when it comes to a user perspective, users, as I mentioned earlier, earn BGT via economic activity, specifically staking liquidity. Now, when users do earn this BGT, they have to delegate it. They can delegate it to any of those validators that we just talked about. They can also decide to sell BGT, as we mentioned, and this is done by burning to BERA and then selling BERA on the market. Now, when it comes to earning, especially as a farmer like myself, one of the things that I will be doing is looking for profitable gauges to farm. And you have to really be a little bit careful with this because every whitelist pool will have different risks and payoff. I've written a few on here. Perps, for example, when you're kind of often providing liquidity, especially in AMMs, you are going against the traders. And so you have the risk where if traders do well, then you're going to lose from some of your liquidity. When it comes to money markets, you have a risk of being liquidated if prices change and your collateral drops in value. And when you're providing liquidity, especially on DEXs, for example, if you're providing volatile assets, you do have a risk of impermanent loss. The point I'm trying to make here is that every single gauge that you're farming when it comes to BGT will have different risks and payoffs. And this is something that I think as a farmer, when you're trying to earn BGT, is an important thing to pay attention to. Now, when it comes to delegating, there are two main reasons of why you would want to delegate BGT to a specific validator. One of them is, let's say if you're farming already, let's say if you're farming on a money market and the validator that you're delegating to is already sending emissions to that money market. Well, by delegating to them, they're actually increasing their rewards. And so you're actually going to increase your earning rate by delegating to them. The second way might be a little bit more indirect. Let's say if you know that Beraland and IVX have got a partnership going where IVX is basically bribing Beraland, and so Beraland are getting these IVX tokens or IVX fees. Now, what Beraland might do is they might take some of these tokens and actually give it back to some of these delegators. And so those who are participating in bribes might be a pretty attractive validator to delegate your BGT to. Ultimately, these are very specific to you, and you have to decide which one is going to benefit you the most. But as a user, this does create some interesting game theory, especially in deciding who you want to delegate your BGT to. Now, the Berachain Foundation are also very important in this. Why? Well, they have three native apps, Bex, Bend, and Burps. And I've basically added an image here of Bex. This is Bend, and this is Burps. And with all three of these, you can actually stake your liquidity with them. And at the moment, you can earn some BGT because of that. So users can deposit liquidity, stake these LP tokens or receipt tokens, and earn BGT. And as a user, you can do whatever you want with that. As we mentioned before, you can either delegate it or you can sell it by burning it to Bera. There's lots of things that you can do. Lastly, we've got the protocols, and protocols want liquidity. Liquidity follows incentives, and validators are the ones who have those incentives. So how can protocols get the incentive, that BGT, that juicy BGT from the validators? As we mentioned already, this all comes from bribes. Yeah, there's lots of different protocols, whether it's DeFi, especially in DeFi actually, DEXs, money markets, perps, derivatives, real world assets, deepin, all of these different protocols, they want liquidity. And one of the ways that they can do that is by bribing validators to send it to them. So DeFi apps specifically can benefit from this. What they can do is that they can give some of their fees or tokens to these validators and in return get these BGT emissions. And let's say, for example, for every $1 of tokens or fees that they give to a validator, in return, they could be given $1.50 or even $2 of BGT emissions. This is significantly more capital efficient than if a protocol were just to give out its native token. And that's because for every $1 of token that they were going to give out in rewards, actually now they're getting $1.50 or even $2. It's like almost double capital efficient in some cases. Now, in terms of like how much they're going to get, this is specific to the deals that the protocols and the validators do together. And this is a really important part. If you find really good deals, I think you're going to create some really interesting opportunities where validators can benefit, protocols can benefit, and users can benefit from significantly higher APRs. This is essentially what the curve wars were, and I think some of you watching are probably familiar with the curve wars. The curve wars was this economic fight where protocols were fighting one another, especially for VeCRV votes, because those VeCRV votes were important in the direction of CRV emissions. And this is essentially the same thing, but on a chain level. Protocols will fight one another to get validator attention. Who's going to win? It's going to be those who are able to capture significant validator emissions to empower their whitelisted pools. And I think this is going to be really exciting to see, when it comes to mainnet. Which protocols are going to be the ones who can capture that? I don't know. Hopefully we can at IVX, but we'll have to wait and see. So when is this going to happen? Well, as I mentioned, Berachain is currently on testnet v2 at the moment, but you can actually play around with BGT by depositing into those whitelisted pools. Currently, these are the 3 from the native apps, but hopefully in due time, we'll hopefully see some whitelisted pools coming, and I think that will definitely come when mainnet comes. So I hope that this video explained a little bit about the different participants within POL and how you as a user, or how you as a protocol, or how you as a validator, whoever's watching this video, can benefit from this. I think it's going to be very exciting. There's lots of game theory involved, but ultimately I expect higher yields, good opportunities for protocols, good opportunities for validators. So I'm excited to see how they all work together. And ultimately, this should help to stop this ghost chain problem. Thank you very much for watching. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, retweet, give this a like, drop a comment if you've got any questions. You can always ask me any questions as well if you've got any questions about POL or Berachain in general, or anything to do with DeFi. I'll be back with plenty more content in the not so distant future.